Yo guys, welcome and thank you for tuning in into this mini faction overview covering the characteristics of all 8 new factions in a fast run. So give me 10 minutes of your time and I will explain you very efficient which unique characteristics, strengths and also cons each faction has. In all likelihood, this is suitable not only for beginners but also for veterans, as it very much incorporates my opinion as a competitive player. I would like to mention that this short guide does not cover campaign mechanics, although the battlefield hints should be useful for your campaign as well. So no time to lose, let's get started. Let's directly start this little faction guide with the Ogre Kingdoms. The most outstanding characteristic of the Ogre Kingdoms are their wide variety of large entities or monsters. Nearly all units on the complete roster are counting as large, what is definitely not only an advantage. The ogres are big, strong, stable and also pretty mobile, because they have a quite good selection of cavalry units and also really fast monstrous infantry units, even if the cavalry is not the fastest, but they reach the level of the greenskin cavalry. Overall, the gameplay pretty much feels quite similar to the greenskins. Their battlefield mechanic is to gain points by killing enemy routing or scattered units, to increase the damage output, heal or reduce the speed of the enemy. The game plan is to overwhelm your enemy with a huge amount of monstrous entities on the battlefield and try to break his neck by monstrous flanking maneuvers, cavalry rear charges or good placed area damage spells. And you will see the enemy units will rout fast as you can think. The ogres have access to the Law of Beasts and their own magical lore, the Great Maw, which is in my opinion a really good new magical lore. In my opinion, the Ogre Kingdoms are top tier race and very strong. So let's continue with Kislev, a very popular faction among many Total War Warhammer players or fans of the Warhammer universe. Kislev has not really one outstanding characteristic rather than different pros and cons. The most Kislev units are quite heavily armored but not really with a high tier characteristic. The infantry is quite average, therefore we have some good options on the cavalry or missile infantry roster. As mentioned, are the units, especially on the infantry corps, quite average, so is the leadership. But we have a very unique ability on nearly all Kislev units named by our blood. This is a routing stop for at least 30 seconds after the leadership is wavering or lower. Kislev has access to their own magical laws, the Law of Ice and the Law of Tempest. Even if I not think both will hit the Olymp of the magical laws in competitive gameplay, I really think they are quite good with a lot of potential. The tactical plan is hit and run or hammer and anvil. We have a lot of hybrid units on the roster that combine missile infantry and infantry units as one. Therefore there are many tactical options available, also with good cavalry options. Even though I would not count Kislev as a high tier faction, moreover as a tier 3 faction, because they have in many matchups hard times. The infantry is not cost efficient and at least not very good, and many other problems. Maybe some regiment of renown will change that in the future. So let's enter the realm of Nurgle, a disgusting and smelly race of demons that deal their damage mainly through poisoning and the resulting attrition. As I said, the outstanding characteristic is poison and attrition, but also good healing capabilities rather than massive fighting power. But Nurgle is also good in melee combat if you find the good combination between infantry and their monsters. The infantry is overall not the strongest, but they don't have to be, cause they have only to stay alive long enough for the opponent to perish due to attrition. Even better, the Nurgle battlefield mechanic generates points for different damage, healing and slowing abilities. The more damage your own units get, what is really nice. Nurgle has access to the Law of Death and the Law of Nurgle, what is in my opinion a really competitive and strong new magical law. Nurgle is definitely not a race for beginners, cause the gameplay is quite intense. The reason for this is that you probably are not winning through fighting power, rather than through casting lots of spells and using your abilities in the right moment. And of course the use of a strong tactic without cavalry. So Nurgle can be really strong in the hands of the right player. I would count them as a tier 2 race with lots of potential. So let's talk about Khorne, a melee focused race, heavily armored and difficult to crack through combat damage. Khorne feels in my opinion very similar to Chaos, both are massively armored with lots of combat power, therefore very slow and vulnerable through enemy mobility. Khorne has like Darwi no access to magic, we have a very strong infantry, the strongest in game 3, and also a good selection of monsters, therefore no missile infantry. We have some heavy cavalry options on the roster and also is artillery available. You have to play Khorne in a very classic style, heavy infantry core mixed with monsters and at least some mobility options like blood crushers and flesh hounds, so you have to win the fight in the front line. Therefore Khorne is quite predictable, cause your enemy probably knows against which build he is going to face. Khorne's battlefield mechanic generates points for killing enemy entities, for gaining different abilities which increase your melee attack, make units unbreakable or cause a huge explosion which is causing a massive amount of AP damage. In my opinion is Khorne a top tier faction, at least in game 3, even if we have some not insignificant cons. The units are very elite and the strongest melee combat power is yours for sure. So let's come to the next demon faction, Slaanesh. Slaanesh is characterized by very good AP damage values among the army roster and very high mobility and speed. Therefore we have a lack in armor values and defense stats. Slaanesh cavalry is very strong and very fast, and we have a quite good selection out of different units. The infantry corps is also well stocked with a good amount of quality units, from cheap low tier units to expensive high tier units. Also we have some good abilities on the units like Soul Sand or Soul Hunters, which increases the performance in addition. The lords hit like trucks, cause we have also here quite good AP values and they are very fast. For example, Nkari has a speed amount of 100, what is more than the most cavalry has. Slaanesh has access to the Law of Shadows, which is meanwhile the most competitive magical law due to the actual relatively broken pendulum. And also access to the Law of Slaanesh, which is in my opinion also quite good, but in the perpetual turmoil of the magical laws in a midfield. Slaanesh's battlefield mechanic is quite similar to the mechanic of the Ogre Kingdoms. They need to kill entities and enemy units with a negative moral state to obtain points for abilities to cause damage, hold units stuck, or increase the amount of speed of your own units. Slaanesh is designed for heavy flankings and fast ambushes to slice and dice their enemies faster than they can mobilize or reorganize to prevent this. The Slaanesh units are messable due to a really good selection out of cheap infantry and cavalry units. Slaanesh is in my opinion a tier 1 faction with many potential for different tactics and builds. So let's continue with the next demon faction, Tzeentch. Tzeentch is characterized by heavy spellcaster, missile firepower and flying units. Therefore we have a huge lack in choosable infantry units. Overall is the complete army roster quite thin. Every arm of service has in average just 1 or 2 units available. Tzeentch excels with heavy firepower and flying units, following the motto hit and run. Tzeentch infantry is not able to hold the line or to be involved in a melee combat fight for a very long time. The plan is to massively decimate your enemy with shelling and continue to finish them off with magic and short and efficient aerial assaults. But probably the most important characteristic and the strongest feature is barrier. Every Tzeentch unit has a barrier in addition to its hit points, in other words a protective shield. Only when this has been destroyed the unit gets damage, and the best part is it replenishes to a maximum of the proportional remaining hit points, but only if the unit is not engaged in a fight. But this is a very strong characteristic. Tzeentch's battlefield mechanic is all about magic and casting. The more spells you cast, the more points you generate, for abilities for area bombardments or for big power recharges. Tzeentch has access to the law of metal, fire and the law of Tzeentch. The law of metal and the law of fire are really competitive in good magical laws. The law of Tzeentch is definitely okay, but I wouldn't rate it as high tier. Tzeentch is in my opinion a top tier faction, but only excels in the right hands, so they are definitely only suitable for experts or experienced players in order to achieve the right outcome. Then the massive shelling in addition with strong magic and flying units will wear your opponent down, definitely. Let's continue with the second human faction, Grand Cathay. Cathay is a very balanced faction when it comes to the army roster or winning options. We have a very well balanced, good amount of different units with good and solid stats in every arm of service available. Therefore we have just one monster available, the Terracotta Sentinel, which is in my opinion in some matchups a quite decent solution, at least in game 3. Cathay is melee based with a good selection in infantry roster. Over here we have some decent low cost units available, which are in my opinion quite cost efficient. Also the missile infantry is well stocked with different good and efficient units. There are no real standalone game changer available like game breaking unique pricey high tier units, but they doesn't have to be in the case of this balanced roster. You can create a lot of different builds here which are really messable because of the low unit prices. Cathay's battlefield mechanic is yin and yang or harmony. When the different yin and yang units are placed near each other or fight on the battlefield close to each other, they will get a buff on their stats and perform much better. Some units have a harmony amplifier which increases the harmony of nearby units. Harmony is in my eyes a quite interesting mechanic, even if it's sometimes quite difficult to pay attention to it in action or to implement the perfect harmony in the heat of the battle. Grand Cathay has access to the law of metal, the law of heavens and their own laws, the law of yang and the law of yin, which are all four in my opinion good magical laws. The law of yin and the law of yang are in my opinion quite underrated. Another mechanic is mastery of the elemental winds, which increase the power of your spells when 2 units in your army share this ability. In summary, is Grand Cathay a really good faction with many solutions. I actually see them in tier 2, but there is probably more to come. So let's come to the last faction, the Daemons of Chaos. The Daemons of Chaos are a very own race or count as a separate faction, even if they do not have their own individual units. With the Daemons of Chaos, you can mix all demon units from all 4 Chaos gods together, so Slaanesh, Khorne, Tzeentch and Nurgle. But only demon units, no chaos warriors whatsoever, so they have a huge selection out of different units in every arm of service available. Demon units have a quite low amount of armor, therefore physical resistance of 20%. They do not rout, are immune to terror and start to take damage when the leadership is low. All demon units cause fear. You can choose different unique demon princes, each with reference to the 4 demon races and their individual spells, Law of Slaanesh, Nurgle and Tzeentch. The battlefield mechanic is to inflict damage with your lord to generate points for different random abilities. Like the other point collecting mechanics, the more points you collect, the better the ability what is available for you, at least in theory. With the Daemons of Chaos we get a random ability, what is interesting but not predictable and also not plannable in case of getting a higher value ability when you collect the points. For this reason it is in my opinion a huge disadvantage, this mechanic over here on the Daemons of Chaos. So not much more to explain. In addition, you get with the Daemons of Chaos a round faction with a huge army roster which consists of all demons of all 4 Chaos gods. This is a huge advantage when it comes to unpredictability of your build, because you gain many advantages of all 4 demon races combined. In the actual tournaments and private leagues, the Daemons of Chaos are ejected from competition for obvious reasons. Therefore, there is no point in explaining any further assessment of their place in the competitive field. Yo guys, this is the end. Thank you for tuning in. If you liked what you saw, give me a thumb up, give me a like, give me a comment, give me a sub, whatever. And we are going to see us in my next video. Thank you, have a good night and see you next time.